This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. All views and opinions expressed are the views and opinions of the individuals and sponsors presenting them, and not the LTB network. Enjoy the show.
John Bush here from SovereignBTC, your guide to the practical side of everyday Bitcoin use, and I want to deliver a little talk here today called Sovereign Living Meets the Blockchain. And we're going to talk about the philosophy of sovereign living as it applies to various areas of our lives, from economics to food, health, defense, and even building alternative voluntary societies. So let's just start by defining sovereign living. Philosophy of sovereign living, or the idea of living sovereign, essentially holds that we ought not rely on centralized or coercive institutions in order to solve our common problems and fulfill our wants and needs. Now, these types of institutions, these coercive centralized institutions, could be a government, even if it's a quote-unquote representative democracy, any government that rules through arbitrary authority at the barrel of a gun. Also, large corporations, like Walmart, for example, or Aetna for healthcare provision. The idea is, if we depend on these institutions in order to live, in order to survive, if these institutions were to fail or become corrupt, and I would argue that many of them are intrinsically corrupt and coercive, then we're going to be left holding the bill. We're going to be left without anything to provide for ourselves. There's the classic quote, that government which can give you everything can also take it away, and I think that really rings true in more ways than one. So not only does it create an environment where if you're dependent on these external institutions that you could, miss out should there be some sort of collapse of these institutions, or should these institutions fail or pack up or decide to become corrupt and immoral, bad actors, but also, again, intrinsically, I think there's some ethical concerns with relying on these institutions or utilizing their services, especially if you voluntarily choose to do so, especially with coercive monopolistic governments. These are institutions that compel obedience through coercion. In other words, through the fear that violence could be inflicted upon you should you not comply. A perfect example, of course, April 15th happened just recently. So millions and millions of Americans go and pay their income tax because they fear if they were not to pay their income tax, they could have their property taken away from them, they could be put in jail, or worse, they could potentially be killed should they choose to resist. This is the type of obedience that takes place. Even though many people morally object to what that money is being used for example, foreign wars of aggression or building police states and Big Brother apparatus here at home, even if they object to that, people still feel compelled to do so because the state demands obedience through coercion. And I think that's wrong. I think it's morally objectionable to live in an environment where people are forced to participate in institutions which they have no use for or which they find morally unacceptable. This could go for, let's say there's conservatives that are opposed to abortion, yet the county health and human services department subsidizes the practice of abortion. I think it's wrong to force these people who are opposed to abortion to pay for the service. Likewise, if there's, on the flip side, I don't like to use the left and right dichotomy also, but it's there, it exists. The people on the left, liberals, maybe they don't appreciate paying for war or subsidizing big corporations. Yet they're forced to pay these taxes or service fees, and they're forced to subsidize it and pay for it anyway. I think that's wrong, and I would like to see a society where people are able to voluntarily contribute their money and their wealth to that which they believe brings value and benefits them, their lives. And everything else, if they want to contribute through philanthropic means, by all means. If not, they should just be left alone. So I just wanted to point that out. That's the why, in my opinion, why we ought to avoid these centralized institutions. We can become dependent on them, and if crap hits the fan, if these institutions fail, if they become corrupt, if they go in a different direction that's no longer in your best interest, you could be left standing there without your services, without your food, without your health being provided for, without your security. And that's why it's important that we take it into our own hands. And on top of that, I believe that many of these institutions, these coercive and centralized institutions, are unethical on the surface. Now, let's talk about the flip side. That's the coercive, centralized institution. Here's why I believe in decentralized, peer-to-peer organizations, voluntary organizations, because when we exist in a paradigm where everything is done voluntarily, everybody benefits. Nobody would choose to participate in an institution, a cooperation, any type of relationship, a contract, unless it was mutually beneficial. That's what happens when you have a voluntary arrangement. When there's coercive mechanisms, one of the parties could lose out. And the only reason why they participate, not because it brings them a benefit, but because they're afraid of what would happen should they not participate. So I want to see an environment where people act, people build relationships, associations, contracts, relationships, communities, because they feel it's in their interest to help and partake with other people. Now, on the flip side, there's also this principle called subsidiarity, and that's the idea that authority should be vested at the lowest common denominator. This is actually a principle that came out of the Catholic Church, which is rather centralized, which is kind of ironic. But the principle of subsidiarity holds that if there is to be governance or if there is to be some sort of authority or decision-making body, it should be all the way decentralized to the person, to the family, to the community, the neighborhood. Maybe if there's a municipality or some sort of city-state to that level. But when you start building these massive nation-states, especially the massive empire known as the territorial United States of America, it's pretty damn big, and history has shown that it's very difficult for one small city thousands of miles away to govern the entire area and actually do it in a way that benefits the people and remains with their interests. When we have these scenarios of centralization of power, it creates an environment where the individuals are not getting what they want. Rather, those who have the strongest voice, those who have the most money, those who have the most power, those who have the biggest guns are able to influence and create edicts, resolutions, ordinances, legislation that affects everyone whether they like it or not. So I'm against centralization. Now, when we decentralize it, it puts it close to home. It puts it close to the people. For example, a local government, a city government. I live in a small city. It's about 45,000 people. I see the council members all over town regularly at the places I frequent, at the farmers market that we do. The mayor just walks up and says hello. And I think that whenever you have elected representatives that live in the same area and that are frequently seen by the community, it's hard to turn into a total tyrant because you can bet your bottom dollar you'll be held accountable, or at least you'll get some nasty stares. So when we decentralize it, especially when we start implementing technologies like blockchains and these peer-to-peer types of organizations and institutions and systems and protocols, now this creates an environment where they can effectively be devoid of corruption if you put enough trust and if the system that is operating the program is faithful, and if it's true and if it's consistent. You can create an environment where a central party, a central bad actor cannot come in and take over the institution and use it to further his own ends at the expense of everyone else's. And I think that's what the promise of the blockchain really is. And so I want to take this idea of a decentralized, peer-to-peer, node-based system like the Bitcoin blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, and I want to apply it to a few different areas where we can explore what sovereign living is all about. So I'm going to talk about sovereign living, the basics in these various areas: economics, food, health, defense, and the building of alternative voluntary societies. And then I'm going to talk about how the Bitcoin blockchain and blockchain technology in general can benefit these various areas and help us in achieving sovereign living. Let's go ahead and start off with economics and building economies and markets and exchange. So obviously, whenever you have a centralized institution like the Federal Reserve Bank that's taking care of this, it creates an environment that's easy to manipulate and easy to further the interest of a tiny group of people, an oligarchy, so to speak, at the expense of everyone else, especially when everyone is forced to participate in the monetary system, whether they like it or not. And we see that phenomenon in the United States of America with the legal tender laws that require businesses to accept these Federal Reserve notes, even if they think the Federal Reserve note is losing value, which it is, as they create more money. Go to these big banks and businesses go to the discount window. They shell out more money. But what if someone has a moral objection to using the Federal Reserve note because they believe every time they exchange it or receive it, they're providing value to the Federal Reserve note, which is in turn creating an environment where the central bank can print endless money to fund endless wars. But people don't have a choice. That's why I recommend people engage in the use of alternative currencies. And there's nothing more sovereign and sovereign living when it comes to economics than alternative currencies and alternative means of exchange. So I'm just going to go over a few, and then we'll talk about Bitcoin. The first and the best alternative means of exchange outside of central bank fiat is barter. Good old barter. It's where it all started. You have a good or service that someone else desires, go ahead and trade it with one another. Man, that's going to be really difficult for the man to keep tabs on that unless you voluntarily turn over that information. But go ahead and barter. We had a chicken flock. We had about 110 chickens at one point, and we were getting dozens and dozens and dozens of eggs, and we would barter. We would barter eggs with our barber. We would barter eggs with our friends that had other fruits and vegetables. It was really amazing. We were essentially creating money out in the chicken coop out back. It wasn't a printing press, but it was eggs were plopping out of these chickens' rear ends, and we had something that we could use as a barter. Now, of course, the problem with barter is if there's not a match between needs and wants with two parties, then it's difficult for an exchange to take place. That's where money comes in. We create a common medium of exchange that people can utilize in order to exchange goods or services when they don't necessarily have the exact good or service that the other person desires. And so I think one of the best monies that's been out there that's really stood the test of time, although it's highly manipulated right now, is silver, precious metals. I prefer silver to gold because it's more affordable and it's more divisible. One of my favorite types of precious metals is what's called junk silver. There's nothing junky about it, but these are any dimes, quarters, half dollars that are dated 1964 and before are actually comprised of 90% silver. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I think silver's probably trading for around $20 an ounce right now. So that means that a silver dime dated 1960 is actually worth about, somewhere between $1.50 and $2. So what we've been doing, and this is actually one of the first alternative currencies, this and barter, that my wife and I really got excited about. We would even go to farmers markets in Austin, Texas, and encourage vendors to accept silver. And we actually did pretty well encouraging the use of silver. We found some vendors that were even already into silver and started telling us about the Federal Reserve Bank, so that was pretty exciting. But you get people to start using this junk silver, or silver ounces, just use silver in general. You start creating exchanges and economies and markets where there's businesses and providers and merchants and consumers that are using silver. And what happens is, should there be some sort of economic collapse, or should the Federal Reserve fiat be deflated or inflated to where it's no longer worth anything, there's already exchanges and networks in place where people are trading amongst one another. That way, should crap hit the fan, people can relatively insulate themselves and still engage in economic exchange for mutual benefit. That's something that I think is really excited about silver. It's difficult to inflate. You can't really inflate it because it takes so much energy, time, resources to pull it out and actually extract it and expand the supply. However, it is being manipulated by the likes of JP Morgan, so that's rather unfortunate. So that's silver. I strongly encourage people to engage in barter. I strongly encourage people to hold silver as a savings, as a hedge against inflation, but also, more importantly, to use silver to go ahead and create those relationships. So if something were to happen, we can avoid all the downfall that comes with not being able to trade or having a plumber that already has a particular money. Now, there's also things that spring up all throughout the country and throughout the world. They're like labor hours. We have the Ithaca hours. There's one called the Austin Time Exchange here in Austin, Texas. These essentially are currencies that you can issue on your own with a promise to redeem that currency with an hour of your work. So let's say I did computer programming, and I would create the John Bucks, and I would trade them with people. Say there's a barber, and I wanted to do some haircut service with them, and they accept this Ithaca hour, this Austin Time Exchange. I go ahead and issue 2 hours worth of my programming. I pay them to her. Now, she can turn around and take that and either exchange it with someone else that's participating in the program and issuing their own currency, or she can come back to me to redeem them for those hours of programming. Now, I really like this system because it puts the user in total control of the issuance of their currency, but there's one downfall. Many of these systems operate in an egalitarian fashion because I believe many of the people that participate in the systems are more socialist or left-leaning. And what happens is you have an environment where someone that's been a mechanic for 25 years, his hour is worth the same as the guy that's been a mechanic for 6 months. And I think someone that has a little more expertise and specialties in that area is worth a little bit more. That's the same thing as a surgeon going in and working 1 hour. Surely his hour ought to be valued greater than, the guy that's going in and just giving you stitches or giving you some medicine. Whatever. If someone has more experience, they ought to be paid more, they should have a higher value. But I'm not to say that I'm not going to force that, of course, on anyone. And there are some labor hour exchanges throughout the country that allow the users to dictate exactly how many hours they pay for whatever it is that they're exchanging. So I think that's valuable. But be aware of the ones that insist upon 1 hour being worth 1 hour, no matter how much experience or no matter what service or good it is being traded. So those are labor hours. And finally, we have Bitcoin, ladies and gentlemen. We have cryptocurrencies, decentralized, peer-to-peer, algorithmic, cryptographical currencies, a medium of exchange that has a finite limit. Some of them have infinite limits. Some of them infinitely inflate. But Bitcoin has a finite limit. You can expect how the money supply is going to be expanded, and then it's going to stop eventually. There's a lot of information and knowledge. It's not dependent on any central actors. No one can come in and manipulate it. It's a lot more difficult to manipulate than silver, for example. And I think there's extreme value in using this currency, especially when it's tied to this blockchain technology that creates a public, transparent ledger that we can transact upon, and that we can, again, expand the use of the blockchain to go further than currency, which is something we're going to talk about in these different areas. But of course, if you're listening to Sovereign BTC, you're probably familiar with Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin came around, I was already into alternative currencies. I was already into the philosophy of sovereign living. And man, Bitcoin just resonated with me on such a high frequency because it's so perfect. It's such a perfect tool to demonstrate that these ideas, the ideas of anarchism and voluntary living and sovereign living, they actually work because Bitcoin is proving it and showing it, and it's actually taking place. Now, here's a cool thing that people can do and that we already see taking place with things like Aurora Coin. You can create your own decentralized cryptocurrency for your location, for your locale. And I think that's something that's really promising. People can have even more control and more power over the value of that currency and the rules that go along with that currency and the code that goes into that currency. That's something that I see really helping to benefit small communities. Imagine, I live here in San Marcos, Texas. Imagine if San Marcos, population 45,000, created their own alternative currency that all the local businesses accept and that the college students use and that employers pay their employees or contract labor with that. I think that would be really exciting. It could give the community sovereignty and authority over their own currency that they use. Some people would argue just use Bitcoin, and I may agree with that, but I think it's exciting to explore the possibilities, and I'm excited about following Aurora Coin and seeing how that goes up in Iceland. The next area I want to explore is food production. Now, being dependent on a centralized institution to provide for your food and sustenance is a very dangerous thing. Many people feel that even here in the United States, we are privileged to not have to worry about food or famine or collapse of the food supply chain. Well, if that's the way you think, then you got another thing coming to you, because the food supply chain is extremely insecure and it's stretched all across the world. And just the transportation alone, if anything were to happen, like some sort of World War III scenario, like Ukraine and Russia and NATO getting involved, or some ports and seas and straits in the Middle East getting shut down and it being difficult for oil exports, anything like that, any massive geopolitical problems could lead to a massive increase in the price of oil, which could shut down some of the 18-wheelers transporting food across the country. A terrorist attack or a false flag terrorist attack, a natural disaster, an economic collapse, which this country's economy has been teetering for quite some time now, and it's all artificially inflated. It's all just a big faux show, really. It's not that far out of the reality to assume that the economy could collapse. Were that to happen, man, they're not going to have food in the grocery stores. Just sit back and think, where do I get my food? Chances are you get all of it or a large majority of it from the grocery store and from going out to eat. Man, if crap hits the fan, those grocery store shelves are going to empty, and it's going to be very difficult to resupply them. And you're going to be hungry. And if you're a parent, a mother or father, I cannot even fathom not being able to feed my children. I don't know what it would feel like. People are going to lose their stuff, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to probably resort to some things that they never would have considered doing, that never would have been in the realm of possibilities. To sit and watch their children starve, you can bet your bottom dollar, you can bet your bottom Bitcoin that they would consider stealing from their neighbors. Yes, indeed. That's why we'll get to defense a little bit further on. This is why I strongly recommend everyone listening, every single person, no one is exempt. I strongly recommend everyone start learning to grow your own food. This could be as simple as setting up some container gardens on your back porch if you live in an apartment. Just setting up a small little raised bed garden. There's a great book, Square Foot Gardening, that you could learn how to set up simple gardens that are very productive, that are easy to maintain. Another thing is get involved with the community garden. Here in San Marcos and in the city of Austin, there's tons of them. Chances are if you live in a mid to large-sized city, there's going to be community gardens all over the place. If there's not one, look for a vacant lot in your community and set one up, or better yet, grow one in your front yard and invite your neighbors to come participate. Check out the Food is Free Project for some information and advice, tips on how to do that stuff. Another thing is to get involved with the community-supported agriculture program. This is where there's a larger, middle to large-size farm, and they invite the community to come participate. And you pay, $50 a month, $100 a month, and they deliver, or they create a drop-off spot where you can go pick up vegetables for the week, for the month. You're building relationships. You're supporting the local food economy. That way, should something happen, these institutions are robust and they can thrive even if crap's hitting the fan all around you. Now, some people think it's going to be easy to grow food. Some people have a survival seed bank in their closet, and they think, oh, man, crap hits the fan. There's no more food at the grocery store. I'll just throw some seeds out in the back, and I'll be okay. I'll be able to provide for my 4-member family just easily. Well, I got news for you, folks. It's actually not that easy to grow food. We've been doing it for about 4 years now, and boy, has it been a struggle. Just about every summer that comes along here in the state of Texas, it wipes out most of our crops. We haven't become resilient enough to withstand 100-degree weather. It's not as easy as it looks. You got to nurture these plants. You got to watch out for parasites and pests and antagonist plants and the weather. It is very difficult. That's why I strongly think now is a better time than ever for you to get your hands dirty and learn how to grow food. At least learn the basics. Grow a tomato plant in your backyard so you can show yourself that you can take a seed to fruit. It's very important, ladies and gentlemen, because you're going to have to save those seeds and recycle them. I'm telling you, it's not paranoia, folks. There's a American exceptionalism that takes place in this country where people think that, oh, yes, America, we've had such a strong economy and we're the leader of the free world. This could never happen here. Folks, you got to take your heads out of your rear end and realize that it's just as possible here as it is anywhere else. And in fact, because Americans have this attitude of superiority, maybe not you listening, maybe not me, but it's out there. Because Americans have this attitude of superiority and this privileged mindset where everything is provided for them in a nice little plastic box they can just go to the grocery store and pick up. It's just so simple and so convenient. I think things are going to be worse here in this country than they are in third world countries when crap hits the fan. I think people are going to be left with no idea how to take care of themselves, and it's going to be nasty. That's why, again, I strongly urge you, the listener, to start growing a container garden in your backyard, get involved with the local food economy, find a community garden, start a community garden, do community-supported agriculture, and be sure that you can secure food for yourself and or your family in the event that the grocery store isn't able to do it for you. That's my bit on that. Now let's tie it into Bitcoin and how the blockchain can help to strengthen the idea of not being dependent on centralized or coercive institutions to provide for your own food. One other note, one thing that these coercive institutions, you can bet that they'll do, and they already have done. In fact, Henry Kissinger penned a national security memorandum, I think it was NSSM 200 or something, back in the 70s or 80s, where he talked about using food as a weapon in order to manipulate world leaders into complying and giving up their natural resources to the Anglo-American establishment. Don't think for once that the American government will not say, okay, folks, we know that you guys are starving. We know that crap hit the fan, that we're in total chaos. We've implemented martial law to maintain control. You can come to the town center. You can come to the local stadium to get your food rations. But first, we're going to need to check your vaccination records, and we're going to need you to turn in your firearms or whatever. We're going to need you to turn in your gold. We're going to need you to turn in your Bitcoin. Governments and greedy a-holes will, in fact, use food as a lever to get you to do things that you never would have done before. Likewise, people will voluntarily choose to do that of their own accord. People will go and steal from their neighbors, and if they're armed, you can bet your bottom dollar they'll point a gun at you to take your food rather than watching your kids starve. This happened before in the human experience, and it happens in this country. Things are bad, folks. We need to maintain control over our sovereignty, over our food, the most important thing we could possibly have. Food and water. There's no survival. There's no thriving. There's no checking your wallet to see how much Bitcoin's gone up without food and water. It's absolutely important. Now let's talk about how the blockchain's already gotten into this space. There's something exciting. It's a Bitcoin 2.0 protocol, an altcoin. It's called permacredits. And essentially, it's these tokens that are issued that represent value built in the permaculture community. They can represent a share of a farm, and you could have your permacredits. You could tell how much food you put in, how much credit you put in, how much food you get out based on how much credit you put in. There could be ownerships in farms and factory and farming equipment. I mean, this is really exciting stuff. This is something that Adam Levine of Let's Talk Bitcoin's been working on. It's called permacredits. Definitely check that out. I had an exciting idea, and this is something that we're going to implement at our farmers market booth. We don't have a whole lot of food that we're selling at the farmers market right now. We recently moved off of our farmstead, and we're rebuilding another farmstead a little bit further out of town. But we're going to be doing kale chips and all sorts of cool stuff at the farmers market. And right now, the farmers market's a bit of a Bitcoin outreach booth. We are selling a My Magic Mud. You can check it out at mymagicmud.com. They do accept Bitcoin. It's an all-natural teeth whitener. But what we want to do is get all the vegetables, and we want to put up an LCD screen that has our Bitcoin wallet address, that has our address, and it shows the blockchain.info site, and people can come and purchase their produce with vegetables, and then they could see it, bam, show up there on the blockchain address. Boom, boom. I think this could be awesome for a larger farmers market booth to implement, where people just come up, they grab the head of lettuce, and attached to the head of lettuce is a little QR code. They take their Bitcoin wallet, they scan the QR code, it shows up on the LCD screen, and if you live in a small enough community, there's enough trust built, you may not even have to have a register or someone check you out. The people can be honest. Not everyone will be honest, but maybe that's the cost of the free rider problem. But people can wait to see their address, their transaction populate. Once they see it populate, boom, they walk away. People can keep an eye on this, too, to make sure there's no theft. But it would be an awesome, exciting way to track the progress, to give people a stake in it, to say, hey, I'm contributing to this local farm, to this farmer's market vendor, and I can see how they've been earning Bitcoin throughout the day. Be totally transparent, accountable to. It'll be accountable to the organization, too, to make sure no one's holding on to any money and everything's totally accounted for. I think that's pretty exciting. A whole farmer's market could even create their own alternative currency. We have the San Marcos Farmers Market we participate in every Saturday. There could be San Marcos Farmers Coin. Someone had to come up with a clever name. I guess it's the Bobcat coin. That's the university mascot down here, Texas State University, my alma mater, by the way. I think that could be exciting. Farmers markets could have their own coins, or even regional farmers markets could have their own coins. This is something similar to what permacredits is doing. Another thing that could be utilized, the blockchain could be utilized for fundraising to help provide food for the poor, which is something that Sean's Outpost, Jason King, they're already doing very similar work. They're providing housing and all sorts of resources to the needy. People with Bitcoin can send it there to a particular address. It can all be publicly transparent and documented, make sure there's no funny business going on, and then that can be then sent to individuals. Another thing, if you have a community and one of the community members is struggling, the community can come together, set up a Bitcoin address for them, and then people can chip in Bitcoin to this particular account. And everyone can see it show up. And then that family can have the private keys, and they can go ahead and cash it out. And, better yet, they could send it to gift.com and go get their groceries at Target, which has a good organic selection. I want to throw that out there. Or if they live in an area that just so happen to be lucky enough to be around a Whole Foods, which is an awesome organic, a lot of non-GMO stuff, you can get a gift card, gyft.com, gift.com, and go ahead and hit them up there. So there's all sorts of ways where the blockchain can be utilized in order to help us find sovereignty when it comes to the area of food production. Moving on, let's talk about natural health. Whew, man, talk about a centralized nightmare, what's taking place in the United States and other Western countries, and third world countries don't have any healthcare system whatsoever, many of them. But what's taking place here is just absolute bureaucratic nonsense, and it's being further centralized away from the people. It's being taken away from the authorities being taken away from the relationship between the doctor and the patient. It's being put in bureaucracies, being put in the executive branch, the legislative branch. It's absolute nonsense. There's no semblance of any type of market activity anymore. It's all bureaucratic BS, and it's rather upsetting. In the first place, I think people ought to think deep and hard about how dependent they are on Western allopathic medicine, and if you have not yet explored naturopathy or homeopathy or any type of natural medicine that seeks to strike the root of the problem, correcting any types of imbalances you may have in your system, rather than focusing on the symptoms alone and kind of putting a Band-Aid on a massive wound rather than sewing the whole thing up, I think it's important for people to do that, because unfortunately in this country there's obesity, there's heart disease, there's cancer just running amok. Everyone seems to have diabetes. I have a friend that cured his diabetes, by the way, by using natural medicine and naturopathy from my good friend Dr. Buckley, who just so happens to be on the board of the Center for Natural Living, 501c3. That's the organization I'm the executive director of. But I think it's important for people to explore this. I just see far too many people that are hooked on pharmaceuticals and that just take the word willy-nilly. They don't question the word of their MD because he has 2 letters next to his name, MD. Oh, MD, he's holier than thou. We must covet his opinion and not seek to explore our own options or find truth through ourselves. But I'm telling you, folks, a lot of the diseases and sickness that people suffer, especially chronic diseases, it's because of an imbalance. And it most likely comes down to what it is that you're eating. People eat crap, from genetically modified nonsense that's wreaking havoc on our internal systems, to pesticide-laden vegetables and fruits, to just cramming endless sugar. These sodas have 45 freaking grams of sugar, folks. If you pound a soda a day or more, that's not good. It throws off your entire system, your metabolism. Your heart has to work harder, especially if the soda has high fructose corn syrup. You got to be kidding me. This stuff has mercury in it. It causes all sorts of problems. It's unnatural, and it tweaks your system out. And I think if there's a couple simple steps that people could take to get healthy, cut high fructose corn syrup, dramatically lower your intake of sugar, stop eating fast food, and only eat organic, or at least eat as much organic as you can. If you want to take it one step further, try gluten-free. People say, oh, well, that's just for people that have celiac disease or people that have intolerance to gluten. And my wife started gluten-free, and I said, I eat bread all the time. I love bread on my sandwiches, my hamburgers, my pizza crust. I don't have any problem with bread. I feel just fine. Well, I took the leap, and I went gluten-free, and oh my God, there was a noticeable difference. For the first time in my entire adult life, I was waking up and not feeling tired. That's right, folks. I wasn't even grumpy before I had my coffee. I'm telling you, you may think that you can tolerate gluten just fine, but try cutting it for just 15 or 30 days, and you'll realize that you've never experienced life or health in the way that you have once you've cut that gluten out. I think that everyone has a gluten intolerance. I think our bodies have not yet evolved to be able to process the grains, especially the crap fake grains that we have now. It's not even natural stuff grown in nutrient-dense food anymore, folks. It's just crap and garbage. Nonetheless, I'm getting on a little rant here. The point is, explore naturopathy and this type of healthcare that strikes the root of the problem and isn't dependent on an institution or a philosophy of medicine that only deals with symptoms. That says, okay, you got, see like you got some rash here going on, you have sinus infection, you have colds constantly. Let's go ahead and pop this pill in your diet. Actually, here's 4 pills. Go ahead and take these. These will deal with the symptoms so you'll feel better. They never stop to ask, why do you feel this way? What is it about your system that's off that we can explore fixing? It always comes down to diet. Always comes down to diet. Change the way you eat, and you will change your life. And in turn, you'll be more productive, you'll be more happy, and you'll be more apt to utilize the Bitcoin blockchain. That's just a quick little spiel. I think it's absolutely important that we don't depend on these centralized healthcare institutions because the prices are going to jack up. It's totally artificial. It's creating an imbalance between the needs of the patient, the needs of the doctor, and the doctor's ability to fulfill the needs of the patient. And I think it's important for us to explore the creation of alternative healthcare cooperatives. And what better tool to utilize to do so than the Bitcoin blockchain? Check this out. After we talk about defense, I'm going to talk about some bigger picture meta community building alternative institutions, building alternative free societies, essentially, on the backbone of the Bitcoin blockchain. But one of the most important things that could be done is the creation of these voluntary cooperatives that deal with healthcare. Check it out. You get yourself 100 to 1,000 people. You all form a mutual aid compact around a number of issues, a variety of issues that benefit you. But let's just take healthcare, for example. My good friend recently broke his leg, his femur, pretty serious break. He was roller skating and tried to cross over like he used to in the good old days and just tripped and broke his leg really bad. Thankfully, he has health insurance, pretty good health insurance from his 40-hour-a-week full-time job, so that's awesome. And they're covering it. But if he didn't have health insurance, he would have been just left to hold the bill. Now, enter the Bitcoin blockchain. Screw the health insurance. Screw working 9-to-5 jobs for the man just because they provide health insurance. We can provide health insurance for ourselves. What if we got 100 or 1,000 people together and we all committed, should one of us have an emergency, A, B, or C, go ahead and list it out, what the people are comfortable with taking care of. Maybe they don't want to take care of so-and-so because they go to the hospital from alcohol poisoning because that's a character trait that we want to avoid. Or maybe you say, hey, we're compassionate for everyone's needs. We want to help everyone no matter what happens. The idea is, should one of your members, 100, 1,000 people, even 50 people, have a problem, a medical problem, everyone commits to throwing in and chipping into an escrow account. It can even be monthly. Hey, put in what you can. Monthly. Chip, chip, chip. Some people can put in more because they have higher means. Some people can put in less. Chip into it. Now we have a fund that's building up. You can even install computer programs and protocol to where the group has to have a consensus that we want to pay it out to a particular participant's Bitcoin address because they've met the criteria and they in fact have a legitimate health concern and they have a legitimate health bill that's been racked up, and it can pay out. It can even be done on a case-by-case basis. My friend broke his leg. The hospital bill is $15,000. We have 1,000 people. Hey, let's encourage everyone to throw $15. Maybe you can't throw $15 right now. Maybe someone else can throw 30 to cover your share. Maybe someone can throw 300. The point is, when you create an environment where your crew, those people that depend on you and you depend on, voluntarily, of course, in a decentralized manner, they start to realize that, wow, I fell ill and my crew took care of me. I'm going to pay into the system and take care of them. It's going to be reciprocity. That's something that's not present in this healthcare system where they compel obedience at the point of a gun, and if you don't participate, they're making you pay an extra fee or extra percentage on your income tax. Are you freaking kidding me? I would rather not be grouped in to the centralized healthcare system with all the people that pound McDonald's, that get their 44-ounce Coca-Colas, that shoot their children full of God knows what. I don't want to be in that healthcare pool because I feel like I'm less at risk. I'm rarely ever sick, ever. My children are never sick. We had a stomach bug about a month ago. Went through the whole family. It was hell, but we fought through it. We pounded our water, vitamin C, coconut water, echinacea, probiotics. We did everything. We did it natural, and we overcame it. But what I'm trying to get at is I do not appreciate the fact that this government here in the United States wants to force everyone to participate in the same risk pool. I don't want to subsidize people's terrible health practices and people's terrible diets, and I shouldn't have to. That's why we need to enter the blockchain and create these environments where this would create an environment, say you have your 100 people and there's someone that's constantly getting sick and everyone's bailing them out and paying for them because that's our mutually agreed upon terms that we're going to help each other out. But look, everyone's going to get tired of the third hospital visit because, you know, Joe Schmo won't stop eating the supersized fries, and people will have an inclination to go to them. Again, you can't do this across 300 million people. You can't go to everyone that's eating like crap and say, hey, I'm subsidizing your health care through the Obamacare. But you can go to your group of 100 and say, hey, come on, man, you've been to the hospital 6 times. We need to get your health in order. Not because we don't want to pay for it, but because we genuinely care about you, because we have a small, decentralized organization. We have a relationship that's tight-knit, where we're not forced to pay for people arbitrarily. We pay for people out of the kindness of our own heart because we like you. And we like your family, and we like what you're all about. So that is how the blockchain can be effectively utilized in order to assist in the provision of health care for a large number of people. It can be totally public, totally transparent, and you could really utilize the escrow services of the Bitcoin blockchain. I think it's really exciting. Another area to explore when it comes to sovereign living and the blockchain is the area of defense. and security. Now, a lot of people depend on municipal police departments to provide for security and to, quote-unquote, keep the peace. But a quick look at the track record of these police departments in major cities especially finds that there's not a lot of safety. That's not the priority. In my opinion, the priority is to maintain the status quo and to help those who are in a position of privilege maintain that position of privilege, and to crack down on those who would object to that and who fail to comply and to pay the central city and all the fees and all that stuff. But you just take a quick look. Everyone says, we need to have the police because there's low-income families that wouldn't be able to afford to provide for their own defense and their own security. But when you take a quick look, you find that those low-income minority families most of the time are the ones that are most harmed by municipal police. Anytime you have a monopoly institution, there's no mechanism of correction. If police were subjected to market forces and they started beating the crap out of people and murdering people indiscriminately with zero recourse, they're shooting unarmed people. In the city of Austin, for example, every summer, never fails, at least one unarmed African American is shot and killed by the Austin Police Department, and never is there justice. If this were to continue to happen and people had the option not to contribute or not to pay, not to subsidize that police force, you could bet your bottom dollar they would go out of business, especially if competition were allowed to thrive. And there could be alternate competing defense forces that could compete for the favor of the people and the dollars of the people. That's why one major component of sovereign living is not dependent on centralized institutions to keep the peace or to keep you safe, but taking that power into your own hands. So, if you don't own a firearm, I strongly recommend you purchase a firearm and learn to use it safely and proficiently to protect your family, yourself, and your community. If you live in a state that doesn't allow you to own firearms or handguns, or a city that doesn't, I recommend getting the hell out of there, because when stuff gets harder, there's going to be more criminals, and the public criminals are going to be even more in your face with their tyranny. So that's one thing I could recommend. Unfortunately, there's gun control in this country, even though we have the Second Amendment. It's just words on paper. It's irrelevant when people have control of the guns and they have the veil of legitimacy in the minds of the masses. So one thing you could do, purchase firearms, learn how to use them, defend your home, start a neighborhood watch group. I mean, this is some simple, basic stuff that can really keep your neighborhood secure, and you won't be dependent on the police to keep it secure. If you have like 3 walks a day, say you live in a neighborhood that has 600 people, find families that could take days, take mornings, afternoons, evenings, or just morning and evening, and people that stay home, go walk. Walk your neighborhood. Keep an eye on what's going on. See if anyone's casing. If anything's suspicious, report it on the local decentralized peer-to-peer information sharing program, the information messaging system, BitMessage. I mean, this would dramatically reduce crime so crazy, and it's just something that's so simple. Talk to your neighbors, build relationships, create a decentralized communication system. Should something happen to one of your neighbors, you call the neighborhood crew, the people that are armed, the people that know how to defend one another, the ex-military, the ex-cops that live in the neighborhood, just the tough guys that are willing to go put their safety and security on the line to defend those that live in their particular area. One thing people explore is the creation of militias. This is a institution that's been around since the beginning of this country, since the founding of the United States of America. It was founded and created through the American Revolution, through citizen-led militias. We recently saw with the Cliven Bundy experience in Nevada, militias organized from across the country to push back on a government that has run amok, that is trying to run these people off their land and killed scores and scores of their cattle. Well, people resisted peacefully. There was firearms displayed, but the militia came in and ran the feds off, for now at least. So I think that's a wonderful experience. The militia isn't something that ought to be demonized and scary. It has nothing to do with Oklahoma City bombing. If you ask me, that was a false flag attack carried out by this country's own government. You can talk to Eric Holder, DOJ, who played a big role in the cover-up. But that's for another show, I guess. The point is, no matter what you call the institution, whether it's a neighborhood watch, whether it's militia, or whether it's just the buddies that get together to keep the neighborhood safe, it's absolutely crucial that we take the provision of defense and security into our own hands. We can't be dependent on these centralized institutions, these municipal police departments. Look what took place in Detroit, for example. The city government collapsed. They declared bankruptcy. And there is effectively no police department keeping people safe. But what do you see taking place? In the ashes of the police department arose private defense agencies that are doing a better job of providing for those who they are keeping safe and secure. And, it just boils down to competition, really. If you have a private defense agency that is being funded by those who use the service, they have a incentive not to kill people or abuse people or imprison them or fine them for going 2 miles per hour over the speed limit. They have an incentive to keep them safe and to do it with a smile, because those people can voluntarily withhold their approval, withhold their consent, withhold their dollars, and boot the defense agency from the town. Now, with the municipal police department that operates through a monopolistic, coercive mechanism, you can't stop contributing because you're forced to contribute through the tax dollars. And in my opinion, that's why this country has police departments run amok, because it doesn't matter how they treat their customers, the citizens of that particular area. It does not matter. It matters not, because they're still going to get their salaries. They're still going to get paid. And whenever you have an institution where the justice is the same party as the plaintiff, should someone come and bring some sort of suit as the defendant, that's going to be problems, because it's just different octopus head. The Justice Department, the local municipal courts, it's the same as the city council and the municipal police department. They're all corporations of the same state. That's why, again, it's important that we build our own institutions. Now, here's a quick way that we could utilize the blockchain in order to do so. What if you got together a group of 50, 100, 1,000 people and you said, you know what? We're tired of being terrorized by our own government. I would question that. It's not my government. I don't take any ownership or claim to this government. Any relationship I have with them is impressed upon me through coercion and fear and force. But if people say, you know what? We're tired of being terrorized by criminals, public and private, we think it's time to create our own defense agency, our own defense force. People could voluntarily do so of their own accord. The neighborhood could chip in and pay people that exist in the neighborhood to patrol the area if they want to have some sort of financial benefit from that. Or people could get together, create an escrow account, and every month chip in a little bit. Bam, we're chipping in $500 this month, chipping in $100 this month, $50 this month. There's 1,000 people doing this. Before you know it, you'll have a good 100,000 plus. You then take that money. You already have the contract waiting with the private defense agency. You have the money in escrow. Once we reach our goal, we send that Bitcoin to the private defense agency's Bitcoin address, and boom, they now contract with you to provide support. Have the community just keep on shelling the Bitcoin out to that address, and you just keep it going. Now we have a 6-month contract. Now we have a 1-year contract. Now we have a 2-year contract. We can utilize the blockchain escrow services in order to provide defense for ourselves. Another thing you could do is, say you have an area, you want to start looking after your own neighborhood, and you find that only 6 people on the block have firearms. Hey, let's all chip in Bitcoin to a particular address. Once we reach the goals, we'll find people that are interested in getting firearms, we'll teach them how to use them, and we'll buy them firearms by using Bitcoin escrow account. Man, pretty exciting. All right, the last thing I want to talk about kind of ties all this in together, and that's using the Bitcoin blockchain to build our own voluntary society. And this is something that's really exciting for me. I had this concept called freedom cells, where you get together with a group of 8 to 12 like-minded individuals, those who are closest to you, those whom you trust the most and who you love the most. 8 to 12 people. Doesn't have to be 8 to 12. It could be any number. But the idea is you start with a smaller group. You commit to one another. You help prep with one another. You help supply one another. You get with decentralized, encrypted communication with one another. You start storing food and water with one another. You make sure everyone in your group of 8 to 12 has a firearm and knows how to use it safely and proficiently. Then you start organizing other groups of 8 to 12, and you encourage the creation of 8 to 12 groups of 8 to 12. You then unite as 100. Now, you're committed to those 100, but you're not as committed as you are to your core group of 8 to 12. Then, once you have your group of 100, you start organizing for the creation of 8 to 12 groups of 80 to 120. Now, before you know it, you have 1,000 people. This can go on and on and on until you have millions of people. Let's get 10 groups of 1,000. We have 10,000 people. Man, you have a lot of leverage and control and comfort, and you could really move mountains with that number of people. So here's what you do. You utilize the Bitcoin blockchain in order to create a voluntary voting consensus system. These people in this 100 group, this group of 100, this group of 8 to 12, you don't really have to vote with a consensus system. You could just have a meeting, but the group of 100, group of 1,000, you could vote on what institutions, what services you would like to collectively help provide for one another and fund. So let's say some of the stuff we already talked about. Hey, we want to start this little healthcare cooperative. Boom, let's do it. We want to start our own little local economy where we trade amongst ourselves with our own alternative cryptocurrency. Boom, let's do it. We want to set up our own food stock. We're all going to start contributing to an escrow account so we can buy food storage in bulk. Boom, let's do it. Effectively, we can create our own voluntary associations. I'm not going to call them governments because the root word govern means to rule over, and nobody's ruling over anyone else. This is all sovereigns participating together voluntarily, collectively for mutual benefit. We can have these institutions, these associations, I almost said government, that transcend geographic boundaries. Right now, we live under a system that's dominated by these arbitrary geographic coercive monopolies, and it's making me sick. Why can't we unite with individuals, no matter where they are in this geographic space, no matter what nationality, no matter what quote-unquote political jurisdiction they fall under? Why can't we unite with like-minded individuals who share the common bond of compassion and wanting to help one another, and wanting to do so voluntarily without relying on coercive mechanisms, monopolies, or the barrel of a gun? We can do that, folks, and the blockchain has the promise to unite the world underneath this philosophy of voluntarism and voluntary association. We just got to do it. And I've listed so many different examples of how we can engage in this behavior. We can start providing for our own health care. We can start providing for our own food. We can use the blockchain to send encrypted messages with one another, and we can all communicate amongst our freedom cells. The freedom cell of 8 to 12 can have a consensus on a message that they want to send to the other participants in the group of 100. The group of 100 could have a consensus on a message they want to send to the group of 1,000. Each one of these groups can essentially engage in what's known as participatory democracy, which is a philosophy that comes out of a lot of left anarchist movements. It's the idea that we can engage in democracy, but we're only required to participate in those institutions which we voluntarily choose to and which we vote to participate in. And I think in that vein, we can have a voluntary society where we only participate and we only utilize those services which we believe benefit us. We can use the philosophy of participatory democracy in order, in conjunction with the blockchain, in order to vote on which services we want to engage in. Let's say we only want to do the healthcare cooperative with our group of 100. Or maybe with 2 or 3 different groups of 100, but we don't want to do it with the other groups of 100 because they're not like us when it comes to certain things, and we don't feel like it would be in our interest, or they're already taken care of. They already have their own health care provided. But we do want to unite under a common defense compact and utilize the same defense agency or utilize the same service to help protect one another under our group of 1,000. So maybe we hold a vote and we decide, we don't want to do the healthcare thing with that other group, but we do want to engage in mutual defense compacts with them. All right, let's see if we have a consensus with our group of 300. Okay, we have a consensus from every single group of 8 to 12 within that 300. We're now going to send the message encryptedly to the other 700 people in our group of 1,000. We're going to decide that, yes, we will use our electronic signatures, our private key signatures, our public key signatures in order to sign a mutual defense compact. And now we have 1,000 people that are united to defend one another from criminals, public and private. This could be a reality, folks. This should be a reality, in my opinion. And, that's one of the things we talk about on SovereignBTC here. And I say it's the practical guide, your practical guide to everyday Bitcoin use. And I think that this is a practical way that we can free the world. You know what they say, free the market, free the world. It all starts with you, ladies and gentlemen. It starts with you, the listener, making the choice, taking it upon yourself to exercise a little sovereignty, to take that leap of faith. Remove yourself from the coercive centralized mechanisms of control and arbitrary authority and terror and fear and hierarchy. Exit those systems and work on building the alternative. Because I know it. I have faith. I don't have faith in everyone, but I have faith that there's enough people out there. If they can just hear this message, maybe it's different from the way that I'm conveying it, but if they can just understand that there's another way to do things that isn't dependent on coercion, isn't dependent on greed and corruption and top-down authority. It's dependent on you and me coming together and realizing that when we work together, we can benefit both of our lives. And now that we have the blockchain technology, the promise is even more real. We can accomplish this. We can find freedom in our lifetime. All it takes is you taking action. So I want to close with this. Some of the ideas I've discussed today may seem a little scary, a little risky, but I want you to know there's strength in numbers. There's strength in unity. And there's strength in truth. And if you believe, like I believe, that we all ought to be free, and if you believe, like I believe, that we can come together and accomplish more, and if you believe, like I believe, I hate to be cliche here, that the people united will never be defeated, then stand with me and let's build the free society we all yearn for, utilizing the blockchain technology and taking power away from those that wish to do us harm. This is John Bush of SovereignBTC, signing off. Peace and freedom.